listeners. Matt and I just wrapped up a conversation with Dennis Meador. Goes by DM, and he's definitely been in the legal profession and the legal marketing world for quite some time, and has found himself in the vertical of podcasts, creating podcasts for lawyers, helping them establish authority, utilizing that vehicle. And obviously, we talk with lawyers every single day, and one of the biggest questions is how can I build more market share? How do I create more knownness in my market, stand out, illustrate differentiators, and ultimately win more business? And DM hits on exactly those points and the power of a podcast. What was your take, Matt?
Yeah, just a great, entertaining conversation with DM, and I think he did a terrific job talking about not only the how-to when it comes to pulling together a podcast for a lawyer or a law firm, but also the why. Why should I be doing this in the first place? So I think it's an amazing conversation, very informative, a lot of great information out there for any law firm who's considering putting together their own podcast.
That's great. We hope you enjoy the show. If you haven't subscribed to the LAWsome podcast yet, please do so. We're constantly talking with some of the biggest influencers in the legal profession, speaking on topics around marketing and management. Enjoy the show. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another LAWsome episode. I'm your host, Tanner Jones, along with my co-host, Matt Smyers. We're kicking off this episode with Dennis Meador, affectionately known as DM. He's the founder of the Legal Podcast Network, and today's topic, a very important one, is around podcasting for lawyers. How to stand out, stay consistent, and grow your audience. Welcome, DM.
Thank you very much for having me, guys. It only took me a year and a half to get on this show. You're like, nope, we don't want you here. We know who you are. You've been around the industry for a while. We're not interested. Finally, I wore you down, so thank you for the opportunity.
Well, congrats on your persistency. That's a lesson for all of us. That may be the primary lesson we all learn today is
there we go.
The power of persistency. So, DM, obviously you have a rich history and background in the legal profession, but especially in media. And so for our listeners who may not be as familiar with you or your work, maybe let's start just speaking about your background, how you ended up in the business of podcasting for lawyers.
So I have been in marketing since I was 18 years old. Actually didn't go to school for marketing. I was in school for pastoral theology, and a telemarketing company was paying the most money. I got there, went to the top on the telemarketing side, and there was guys making more money than me selling ads in magazines. So that's what I wanted to do. I jumped over there and then just kind of climbed the ladder of sold hospital patient handbooks and a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And then in my early 20s, started a business, and it was a marketing company, took off. I had come up with a concept. It was a 6x9 magnet with like emergency power outage, on-call nurse, and then little ads around it. That company took off. And then after that kind of faded away with my partnership there, I got recruited in 2003, I believe it was. So it's about 26. I got recruited into selling into the legal industry. It really wasn't PPC. It was kind of like a PPC buy. And then it was kind of set up the way Legal Match is. You fill out the form. There's 3 attorneys. They rotate it around. And I went from selling ads for $300 to $500 a pop to $5,000 a month. But more importantly, what I learned was I really liked working with attorneys. Now, you guys are probably going to be like, I knew this guy was crazy. First of all, he took 18 months to get here. Now he's telling me he likes attorneys. But what I learned very quickly was the fact that unlike a lot of other verticals where if you challenge them and say, well, if you consider this, they get angry, a roofer or, something like that. I could say to an attorney, well, have you thought about this? And they'd say, and we could counterpoint back and forth. They would argue with me. I would argue with them. And not every time, but often enough to keep in the game, they would say, you know what, you got a point. I'll give you a shot. And I really liked that about attorneys. They were logic-based. They were open to discussion. And so I won't say I completely built my career around that relationship, but I would say through the years, probably 75% of my career has been with legal, specifically white collar in general is probably about 100% from that point on. I've done SEO. I've had social agencies, and I had a partnership with an individual that up until December of 23 had been with him 5 years. But the last year or two, I kept hearing attorneys say, do you guys do anything with podcasts? And we had done like a value add, sort of like we hired a voice actor and they, kind of read out this piece. and created a podcast for them. But I kept hearing attorneys say that, you know, do you do anything with podcasts? You do anything with podcasting? I went to my partner and I was like, I think if we put together like a podcast system for lawyers, I think it would do really well. And he was like, nah, I don't think that'll work out, whatever. So I have this notebook where I keep my business ideas, the margins, how it would work, all of that. Our relationship ended December of 23. By May of 24, I launched fully. Had a little bit of like the buyout and stuff to help me kind of get started and going. So here we are now, not quite 2 years later, and we have over 200 shows that we produced once, twice, or 4 times a month. We have well over 50 people, actually I think over 60 now on the team, and it's something that's just taken off. And what we really approach this as is not how can we give lawyers a podcast, but how can we make podcasts in a way, number one, that lawyers can do it, and number two, that they can really benefit from it. That it's not just them sitting around like Joe Rogan talking about, their golf game or, something on the news or whatever, but something that would actually grow their practice, that would actually bring them in more ideal clients. I've spent, especially the last 7 or 8 years, really helping clients helping attorneys cultivate better clients because of what happened with like SEO and things like that, the commoditization that brought down the industry. So that's kind of how I jumped into it, background with it. I've also done podcasting on my own. I had a podcast in Austin that I launched. Don't go look it up. It's a totally different persona than this guy here. It's my side that loves to go out for food, live music, and, just having fun in life. So, had a great time with that, saw a lot of impact with it. And so I thought, I could kind of take 2 things that I'm pretty decent with and am passionate about, podcasting and legal marketing and working with attorneys, put them into one. And thus far, it's served me and the people that have joined me so far very well.
Well, let's dive in on the topic. Let's talk about podcasts for lawyers. And we've got some questions for you. We want to dive into the how-to, which you touched on there briefly, but let's kind of back it out a little bit and let's start with the why. Why should a law firm or an individual lawyer consider starting a podcast?
Well, I think there's several reasons why. And, I'll try to give you maybe 2 or 3 that tend to jump out the most for me. First and foremost, podcasting is now considered the number 1 most trusted form of media that exists. For 3 generations, Alpha, Z, and Millennial. So, and the other thing is, over 50% of adults now listen to a podcast a week. I think it's something like 60-something% of adults. So this is no longer like your uncle with a ham radio in the basement, like podcasting was, 5-7 years ago. It's become a mainstream accepted thing. So that is the number 1 reason that I give people is it's here. That'd be like you saying, why would I do radio? Why would I do TV? This is an accepted form of media. But beyond that, podcasting gives you the opportunity to build pseudo relationships, which can position you with somebody as a potential client before they ever come in the door. Now, let me ask you a question. You're an attorney. Which person would you rather have calling you? Person A, personal injury near me. Page 1, 57 results. If I click through to some of the directories, hundreds of results. So I put together a list of them, and maybe we'll go with a different one, estate planning, because that's contingency is contingency. But let's just say estate planning. So I call, how much is an estate plan, right? Because if everything appears the same, the only differentiator is the cost. So number 1, they call you because you're on that list of 10 people. Maybe you're number 1, maybe you're number 10 that gets called, but you're just another attorney. The second person says, I'm in my 50s. Now they go online, they say, I'm in my 50s. It's been a while since I did my will. Do I need to update it? And then they see this video pop up. Maybe it's a minute or 2, and it answers a very simple question. And then they see that they can listen to a 15, 20-minute or watch a 15, 20-minute podcast. Now they go to the attorney's website and they see all these different questions being answered. What about property? What about my children? What about my grandchildren? And so now they're watching, they're listening. Think about this. A podcast is 15 to 20 minutes of somebody listening to you by choice and your expertise. So you've answered their questions, you've assuaged their fears, you've given them clarity. And now when they call you, the question becomes not how much is it, but how much is it to be able to work with you, which is a vastly different approach. And that's what we try to cultivate, is authoritative positioning that allows attorneys to bring people to them as opposed to being found by people and then price shopped. So that's another huge reason. Number 3, it's evergreen. Especially if you're doing what we do, which is what we call authority podcasting, answering questions that your ideal client would have. So that's probably not going to change for 3 to 5 years. Now, if you want to get on and talk about politics, talk about, community news, yeah, you've got a shelf life there. But what we recommend and do with our clients is we strongly suggest that they kind of take that evergreen approach. I talk to attorneys all the time that sign up with us that they're like, yeah, I want a podcast. We're like, why? And they said, well, 2 years ago, I appeared on this podcast, and once or twice a year, I get a case off of it. And all I did was talk for 30 minutes 2 years ago. So there's that compounding trust, that compounding time, that evergreen asset. It's not like PPC where you throw 10,000 into the Google machine and you hope it spits out a couple of case gumballs. You actually see the return on investment continuously over time. So I could probably give you another 10 more, but I'd say those are the 3 main reasons why I really feel like attorneys benefit by having a podcast.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest challenges is trying to figure out what to talk about, right? So tell me a little bit about the ideation process in talking to a lawyer and saying, this is what you want to talk about. This is what your potential listeners, potential clients might find interesting and relevant to them.
So number 1, I don't care about interesting, because what we are doing, and I always tell people this, these podcasts are not built for mass consumption. They're built for specific people at a specific time with a specific problem. So what you want to do with your podcast is you want to answer the questions that your ideal client would have, and you want to answer them in a way that makes them feel that you're highly competent in being able to help them. So what we do is when a client comes to us and they say, well, I'm a family attorney in Atlanta. Now, we only work with one of each kind of lawyer in each market. We don't want to have competing clients. It just, to me, doesn't make sense. And so they come to us, they say, I'm a family lawyer. So we say, okay, now that could be custody, that could be grandparents, that could be visitation, that could be divorce. Well, primarily divorce, that's my bread and butter. Okay, tell me about who your ideal divorce client is. Are we talking about 20-somethings, not a lot of assets, they want to pay a few grand and get out of that thing? Are we talking about people in their 30s where maybe the custody is going to be a little bit uglier? They have a little bit of assets, they're probably going to spend 7, 10, 12 grand? Are we talking about high asset divorces where we're going to be breaking up 7 figures across different things? It's going to probably drag out after a while. Are you a whale hunter? What are you trying to do here? And they say, well, kind of the second and the third. So then what we do, we have we have a content director and another person that helps in the content department. One is all she's done is content. She's second generation copywriter. The other one has been doing content with attorneys for over 10 years. And we draw out a content plan where each episode that we shoot with them, and we provide the host that asks these questions, has 7 to 10 questions that revolve around their ideal client. So today's episode, we're going to talk about how to make sure you get the assets that you want in a divorce. Well, what about a boat? Well, if you could prove this and this, according to state law, this and this is typically what we see happen. And so that's what we do, is we draw out the plan based on their client profile, their jurisdictional profile. Because listen, if you're targeting billionaires and you live in Podunksville, Arkansas, you probably don't have a high amount of people that fit your, supposed client profile. So you got to have a realistic jurisdictional profile. And then we do what we call the brand profile, which is actually based off the attorney themselves. Are they high energy? Are they kind of casual? I have everything from one guy, he's actually one of my first clients, and he literally sits back in his chair, wears a ratty t-shirt, usually has something like off color, like Morehead State University. He didn't go to Morehead State University. Just like one time I'm looking at my news feed and it says, you know what? This is what his shirt says. I'm just going to tell you what it says. It says, Uranus can fit 7 Earths, or Uranus can fit 7 Earths inside of it, and then 10 if you relax or something like that. And literally, that was his T-shirt while he's shooting his show. But that's who he is. And so we have everything from just what we call across the desk, just answering questions, all the way up to, I've got one guy, he's always suit and tie, 3-piece, got the nice background. He's always, well, I think, and just very formal. And so we want to know that, like, what hosts do we need to match them up with? What questions do we need to ask them? What type of, music do we want to go with it? The look and feel of the show. So we're looking at all 3 of those when we're looking at content, and we're looking at what we're going to talk about. But at the end of the day, it's really about who is their client, who do they want more of, so that they can position themselves to give more clients that will pay what they feel they deserve.
I have maybe a direct question, more candid question that some lawyers may be asking themselves, and that is, hey, is every personality right for a podcast? And that, to preface the question a little bit more, it's like most people assume lawyers are just comfortable getting in front of a camera and speaking. And I think that is far the furthest from the truth, only because not every personality is an entertainer personality. And so maybe speak directly to the non-entertainer personalities and either discourage or encourage based on what you've experienced in that respect.
Well, we kind of set up our program exactly for that. That's why we provide hosts. We have, I think right now, 5 to 7 hosts. They're professional hosts. Many of them been doing this for many years. Some of them are on CNN and different, Golf Channel and different sports networks and different news networks. Like, these are professional hosts that are used to taking people that aren't used to being on camera and drawing out of them. But the second thing is, we're emulating something that they're already comfortable with. I can't tell you the number of attorneys who said to me throughout my career, if I could get them across the desk from me, I'm going to convert them 8 out of 10 every time. So all we're trying to do for the most part is emulate that situation to drop. So we're not, welcome on today's podcast, we're talking, we're trying to emulate a situation in which they're already comfortable, which is simply QA about a certain situation, normally questions that they're already getting asked in different ways anyway. And so to me, anybody who tells me that they can convert across the desk can have a podcast. Now, the people that are like, well, I hire people to do my closing because I'm so afraid of people and camera and everything. Well, sure, if you're, painfully shy and you're some sort of transactional lawyer and you just want to sit locked up in a room and never face anybody, probably not for you. But as long as you can sit across from a client, why can't you sit across from a host that's professionally trained to listen and draw the best out of you?
Get them talking about what they talk about every day.
Right. Yep, that's it.
Yeah. I'm curious, DM, about frequency and how often recording and publishing and putting a podcast out there. Are you finding a particular frequency that's most effective?
Honestly, the weekly is ideal, but that's probably maybe 10% of our clients. That requires 2 hours a month of our clients' time for 30-minute sessions. So the happy medium is 2 a month. So we probably have 60% of our clients do once a month. And that's just because they're just kind of dipping their toes in. Plus, with a once a month podcast, they only have to show up for an hour every 2 months or 2 hours every 4 months. We do a 4-month contract. And with a 30-minute show, we can get a month's worth of social media content plus 2 to 3 pages of website content out of it. So for 30 minutes of their time, essentially a month, they have all their marketing laid out before them. So what I suggest is twice a month, if you can, but a little bit of something is infinitely more valuable than a whole bunch of nothing. So if one is what makes sense, try once a month. The key is consistency more than frequency. Don't do once a month and 3 months later do 2, and then a month later do 1, and then 2 months later do 1. You want to have a consistent cadence of how often they're being put out. That is much more important than frequency. And the algorithms take consistency into effect even more so than frequency. And so yes, frequency is important, but it's the consistency. If all you can do is give an hour every 2 months, then start there. And then as it builds up and you see the value and you start getting cases off of it, most of our 1 months, if they stay with us, which we have a 92% retention rate if they do 8 months, 2 cycles, because that's when things really start flowing. But during that first 4 months, just getting to learning that cadence of actually showing up, talking for an hour every 2 months doesn't seem like a lot, but you still got to do it. Whether it's easy or hard, if it's not done, it's neither.
What's the ideal promotion strategy once a podcast has been released? Do you find that there are better ways to be able to get the maximum amount of visibility?
The ideal is to do enough with the shorts, because we create, like for every episode, we create 10 short videos out of it. We create 10 audiograms out of it, which is like a static image with the audio over it. And then we create 10 static ads, so 30 pieces of content. But those short videos is what LLMs are being built off of right now, a lot of them, especially if they're QA. So what we're seeing is the best way to promote is to build these shorter videos, put them on social media, not just because you're going to get things off social media, but because they'll index into Google, which will then pour over to Gemini. And so now you're building and future-proofing your content for the new algorithms that are coming as well. So short video that comes from these is the best way to promote it, because one, it's in the social feed. So, and that's the other thing about algorithms right now. If I look at a little divorce video, let's just say on the sly, well, guess how that algorithm works? You guys know, the first time you look at something, that's why sometimes I'll see something in my feed that's political. I don't want to, I'll be curious, but I'm I know if I click that, I'm going to be watching these political videos for the next 2 weeks, right? Mm-hmm. So think about the reverse of that. If you're an attorney and you can keep putting out content that speaks to the issues, the algorithms themselves will put it in front of the people that are already searching for that kind of thing. So there's that benefit to it as well. So I would say it's social media with short video, simply because there's 2 avenues that come off of that, within the social algorithms and then within the LLMs and GEOs and AEOs and whatever, words you want to use to describe this new stuff that's coming out.
DM, this has been super helpful. I mean, obviously we said before the interview here that, us behind the LAWsome podcast, we're big believers in it. The podcast has been going for many years, and we too can speak to the value of brand and just being able to stay in front of your target audience and educate along the way. So we're big believers in the philosophy. I'd be curious to know, are there any questions that you would have hoped we would have asked?
One question I like to hear is, what do you think the future of podcasting is? Because podcasting's kind of become flat, right? It's what we're doing. It's talking heads and little boxes about certain niche subjects.
Sure.
And what I've seen, and this is my prediction, and what I'm seeing come to fruition around me the last few years doing this. And that is, if you look at every media outlet, historically speaking, radio, television, the arc is this: content is king, then production value, then entertainment value, and that's the arc. So then you have to have great content with great production value with great entertainment value. Right now, content is king. Production is starting to step up to the next level, but we're really not there. I just saw an article where creative directors for television basically looked at all the top podcasts and said, aesthetically, how are they doing? And obviously they fared poor. They fared very poorly. Mm-hmm. But having a professional look and feel to your podcast is, I think, the next step that's extremely important. Even with my hosts, I'm I don't want to see a couch in the background. I don't want to see a desk in the background. I don't want to see a dog in the background. I don't want to see, you know what I mean? I don't want to see clippings up here of, when you were in 4th grade, you hit a home run. Keep it professional, keep it all that. So production value is hugely important. But then the entertainment value, especially with AI. And let me give you an example of how we're trying to exhibit that. Our first podcast that we have done is called BAM, Building Authority Through Media. And it is it's a 90s inspired Saturday morning superhero cartoon animated through AI podcast that is a narrative and interview together. So essentially what happens is I get somebody on my show. I'm Bam Man. And they are, I just did one with a guy yesterday, Seth Price, I think he has Blue Shark Digital or something. And he was the search savior or something like that, right? We were talking about search. And we go through and we fight these monsters. You know, we did one on LinkedIn and cloud content. And we just kind of draw this story. And the point behind it is not necessarily that I think that like attorneys are going to watch my show and be like, oh my gosh, I got to work with that guy. But I want wheels to start turning of being like, well, wait a minute. What could I do with my podcast to make it more palatable and entertaining, but still get across the message that I have? That's where I think podcasting is going. The people that are going to be at the forefront and that are going to do well aren't just going to have good content. They're going to have great production, and then they're going to be able to find a way to layer in entertainment value. And you know, what is entertainment value? Sometimes it's just people being goofy like I tend to be, and you know, loud and tell stories and animated, but not everybody's that way. Not everybody has that ability. So AI is giving us a tremendous tool to take and accelerate our content, not replace our content, but accelerate our content so that as people are watching and listening, just like everything else, radio, television, they'll be entertained and not just informed.
DM, we're so grateful for your willingness to come on the show and speak to our listeners. Very important topic. For those listeners who are interested to find you, learn more about you, how can they do that?
Fairly simple, thelegalpodcastnetwork.com. You can search that. You'll find, you know, we have a YouTube channel with thousands of videos from our clients and things like that. We've got, you know, all of that. And then me personally, I am on LinkedIn. That's kind of my playground. I've been growing on there and just relating to people, writing. I have a good time. You know, you might see a picture of my feet on a sailboat. You might see a picture of me and my wife with me dipping her and giving her a kiss. You might see a picture of me being serious. Probably not, but it's on there somewhere. But each one has kind of a story, a lesson, a thought process behind it. I really talk a lot about founder-led marketing because that's really what we're doing for our clients. And so LinkedIn is a great place to connect, hopefully find some great content, and hopefully be entertained by it.
DM, thanks again. We wish you the best.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, guys.